Hello. Thank you all for joining me tonight. My name is Mike Bredling, and I'm one of the Navionics Marine Specialists here in Florida. I was born and raised in Florida. I grew up in Jupiter, fishing the Jupiter Inlet, all up in the Loxahatchee River. When I was about 13, we moved to Orlando, and all of a sudden I had to learn how to bass fish real quickly. And I lived for 13 years in Tampa, fishing Tampa Bay, a little bit offshore, not too much. And then I lived for a year in Key West doing all the kind of fishing you can do down there and up and down the Keys and everywhere else. So I've been pretty lucky to have been able to fish a lot of places, fish with a lot of really good captains who know what they're doing, and I've been able to pick up some techniques. One of the things I wanted to talk about tonight is Pompano. You know, Pompano is one of the most popular fish here in Florida. They're pretty simple to catch. You don't need a whole lot of crazy rigging, and you don't need a boat. You can catch them from the beach. You can fish them in the river. You know, they're very popular. They're not too bad to eat. We'll get into a little bit of that later on too. So once again, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I guess we'll start by saying welcome to winter. You know, we've had a pretty mild year so far, and normally the Pompano wait for the first couple cold snaps to really kick in before they flood the beaches and the schools. But it's been pretty mild. From what I've understood on my coast, I'm in Jensen Beach over here on the East Coast. The Pompano bite's been steady, not as great as it has been, the last 4 or 5 years, but it's been pretty steady. And of course, this last week it's picked up pretty well. I wanted to, we're going to start right here. Right. There is your Pompano. As you can see, it's a, silverfish has got a little yellow belly. A lot of people get them confused with permit, but Pompano and permit are two very different things. And as soon as I get us set up right here, we will get rocking. All right. All right. Again, Pompano are fun. You can catch them anywhere. You don't need a boat. You can catch them on live bait. You don't have to have a bunch of crazy lures. Catch them just a sinker and a hook. A lot of times is all you really need. So there's not a lot of rigging to worry about. The biggest problem with Pompano is finding them. If you're on the beach, you have to be able to get your bait out to them, which usually requires a cast of 100 to 150 yards from shore. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. If you're fishing for them in the river, you have to look a little bit harder sometimes. They've got a lot wider expanse to be able to travel around in. They don't necessarily stay right on the edge of troughs and things like that. So if you're on the river, it's a whole different story. And we're going to talk a lot about the river in a little while. But first I wanted to start with the beach. If you've ever walked the beach in the wintertime, you've seen people fishing for Pompano. They're the guys with the 12 to 13-foot rods stuck in their PVC pipes, and all those PVC sand spikes are 5 paces apart. It's a scientifically proven thing for Pompano fishermen everywhere that you put your sand spike down, you walk 5 paces, you put your next sand spike down. First thing you do when you get to the beach, early in the morning or late in the afternoon is the best time to target these fish, is you want to look for the color of the water. Perfect color for Pompano fishing is kind of a almost opaque jade color. If you go to a Home Depot, they call it pottery green. This is about as close as I could get to the right kind of color. It's green water. But it's that kind of cloudy because the sand's all stirred up inside. Pompano are crustacean eaters. They eat their crabs, they eat your shrimp, they'll eat sand fleas. So if the sand is stirred up enough to make the water this color, that means there's usually something for them to eat in that area. So I've actually gone with Pompano, professional Pompano fishermen. This is what they do. And they will get out of their car at the beach, they'll walk up and they'll look, and if the water's not green, get right back in their car, and they'll head down to the next beach, go a couple miles up, and look for where it's, stirred up. So remember, pottery green, this is kind of the idea what you're looking for. So once you found the right color and you think the water's looking good enough for you to fish there, you're going to want your surf rod. And again, when it comes to surf rods, the taller the better. The more you can handle, the better off you're going to be. 12 to 13 rods, 12 to 13-foot rods seem to be the go-to size. They're pretty common, especially on my coast. The reason you want these rods is this big is because pompano travel in schools. And what they do is they kind of follow the edge of the offshore bar. And that offshore bar, generally speaking, this changes obviously from area to area, but for the most part, about 100 to 150 yards offshore, there's a bar that comes up. If you walk from shore, you're going to walk down, and then you're going to come up on a bar, and then it's going to drop back down. You want to fish the back side of that drop. The schools of fish will travel right along that edge, again, looking for crustaceans, that's where the waves hit it, digs up the sand a little bit more. There's more chance for them to find food there. So you're going to want to be able to get your bait out there. And here's another idea of another example of what I'm showing you. Let's see if I can get a highlighter here. This right here is that offshore bar. You can see it's about 100 yards from shore to the back edge here. This is a 7 right here. This is an 8 right here. So this bar is 7 to 8 feet deep, and then you can see it immediately drops 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's a pretty good drop off right off the back of that. Again, you're going to want to sit here on shore, cast out right to the edge of that bar, kind of let your sinker sit there, and that's going to be the ideal spot to fish, in this circumstance, at least on this Navionics map. Speaking of rigging, it's pretty simple. This is a pretty poor picture. I apologize for this picture, but it's a good example of what a pompano rig looks like. All it is a length of leader. You'll see there's two circle hooks, and then this angler here decided that he was going to put little neon colored foam right above the top of each circle hook. This is a pretty common tactic. A lot of pompano anglers will put either a little piece of foam, a little bead, just something that has color, and they'll go pink, yellow, orange, green, just something they feel that they're going to have the bait on the hook. A little bit of color might be enough to attract a fish to that bait. If it's so turbulent that they can't necessarily smell it, they might be able to see it. At the bottom of this rig is a 1 ounce bank sinker. It's one of those big triangle sinkers that you can see at any bait shop. The goal of the bank sinker is you're going to, again, throw it out 125 yards. You want that sinker to dig into the sand and hang in the sand while your bait is just kind of, hanging down off your leader. This angler, this is a guy I took a picture of out on the beach the other night. He has little pink, flaps. They're little plastic wings basically on his hook, and then he was putting the bait on top of those flaps. Again, it's just another way to kind of draw attention to the bait that you've got out there in the surf. Oops, hold on. We're jumping ahead. Braided line is going to be a huge key when you're trying to cast that far. Monofilament is good in a lot of occasions, but when it comes to trying to cast for distance, braided line is going to zip off your reel. It's going to go through your guides, and it's going to give you a lot more distance. Again, you can pick which company braided line you like. Everybody has their own preference. But 12 to 15 pounds is about the right test for this kind of line. You can go up to 20 if you want. Again, we're not fishing for, snapper and crystal clear water in the Keys here. We're fishing for pompano and pottery green water. So a lot of pompano anglers, because they do have their rods, in the sand spikes with the heavy lines, and the lines are pretty taut all the way out. So it's a big area of just lines in the water. They pick black braided line because they feel like the seagulls and the other birds that are kind of cruising right along the shoreline can see that black line better. And, if you ever had a seagull get tangled in your line, you know what a nightmare that can be. So they feel like if the birds can see the line, they have a lot less tangles and a lot less worries. But color's up to you. Go neon green if you want it. It's not that important. But again, the key here is braided line. Bait, sand fleas. Every pompano fisherman ever will tell you sand fleas are the best bait, and then 75% of them will actually use them. There's a lot of different ways there's a lot of reasons to use sand fleas. First of all, they're natural. They're crustaceans. They're right in line with what pompano like to eat. They're free. Walk out to the water line of any beach and scoop up. You're going to scoop up some sand fleas probably. A lot of guys will come down and they'll scoop sand fleas, put them in a bag, take them back to their house and blanch them. Just boil them real quick. And what that does is it gives the sand fleas kind of a little pink color. If you see in this picture here, they're kind of grayish. If you just boil them for a minute or two, they start to turn pink. And then they'll freeze them, and then they'll come back out to the beach and use them, next time they're fishing. You don't have to go home and blanch them if you don't want to. The pink color, again, may or may not attract more fish. It's a matter of preference, but a lot of people will do that. I personally go down to the shore. I scoop up 4 sand fleas. I fish with sand fleas right from the beach. Live bait, everything's cool. Another way to go about it is to do this crazy fancy scooper. You can go down there and scoop it and get a whole bunch of sand fleas all at once and use them. Growing up in Jupiter, we used to use French fryers, the little wire baskets that people would drop in vats of oil to fry French fries. I've used my hands. My kids use shovels. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to go out of your way to go crazy to get sand fleas. Oops, what in the world? Some of the other things you're going to catch when you're fishing with sand fleas or shrimp is another good pompano bait. You're going to catch jacks. You're going to catch croakers. You're going to catch whiting and catfish, of course. If you're fishing anywhere in Florida, you're going to catch catfish. Sand spikes. We talked about these briefly, and this is an important part of pompano fishing. As you can see, it's just a PVC pipe attached to a metal spike that gets it stuck in the ground, nice and solid. A lot of people use, 3-foot PVC, just straight PVC pipes and bang them into the ground just to keep them solid. The whole goal is once you cast your line out, you're going to reel it just tight enough for that bank sinker to catch, your line to be dead tight, and your rod to have just a little bit of bend in it. Put that in the sand spike, walk your 5 paces down to your next sand spike and do the same thing. When you're done, if you're fishing with 3 poles, you're going to have 3 poles all lined up, all slightly bent. And that's the key part of pompano fishing is the bend. Unlike every other or most every kind of fishing where you sit and you hold your rod and you wait for the nibble, and you jerk it and set the hook and all that. Pompano fishing, you're leaving your rod in. It's going to have this little slight bend to it. Pompano is going to come along, grab your sand flea. And what that does when he grabs the sand flea and the circle hook's going to hook him, by itself. You don't have to do anything. Hook the circle hook. He's going to drag that bank sinker off the bank and it's going to make your rod stand up. When your rod goes from here to here, you've got a fish on. And you go over, reel it in. And if you're doing well and you're going to do a school of pompano, you're going to get this one halfway in. Your other rod's going to stand straight up too. And then your other rod's going to stand straight up too. And all of a sudden, you're going to be running in circles trying to reel in 3 rods all at the same time and try not to lose fish. But that's the importance of the sand spike. It allows you to kind of monitor multiple rods, but it also holds that rod in that kind of bent position right up until you get the bite. Pompano regulations, 6 per day, minimum of 11 inches nose to the fork of the tail. The state record for pompano is 8.4 pounds. You're not going to be catching any gigantic fish out here, generally speaking. A good pompano, if you catch a 3-pounder, you're doing really well for yourself. I think for most cases, you're going to look for 12 to 16 inches is probably going to be a good pompano length. 14 inches and above is a very good eating length. You can eat some 11 inches if you want to, but 14 inches have good sized fillets on them, enough for probably one person. So just remember, that's why you're going to see a lot of the pompano fishermen. They're going to have 5-gallon buckets out with them, and you'll see some tails sticking out of the 5-gallon buckets, and they're taking home their 6 fish per day. That basically is a really quick coverage of the beach. You go fish the river, and like I said before, 100% different, totally different. Even in my case, where if I'm fishing the Atlantic Ocean, off of Stewart, I can literally walk around the edge of the inlet and fish inside the river, and I may as well just throw all my surf rods away and pick up some new stuff. Finding fish in the river's a little bit different. They, like I said, there's a lot wider area for them to run out in. The rivers are more shallow. They feel more secure. There's flats. They're not necessarily on the top of the flats, but they will run the edge of the flats a lot of times. Again, looking for shrimp, looking for things like that. I've caught fish on top of the flats for that matter. Open river. If you're ever cruising down the channel, moving from one spot to the other, you'll skip a pompano. You'll see one just jump out from in front of your boat or jump this way. Or if you'll go and you'll hit a school, maybe 2 or 3 jump at the same time. That's called skipping pompano, and that's one of the ways that a lot of pompano anglers will look for them. They'll actually, hopefully, when there's nobody else around trying to fish, they'll get up on plane and they'll skirt the edges of the flats, and they'll kind of run around the flats or in the area hoping to skip a fish. And when they do skip them, they'll stop the boat and they'll fish back to that spot. Again, they're schooling fish, so they'll move around in a school, and if you can usually find one, there's usually some more right behind it. Again, don't do that when there's other people around and get stuff thrown at you. But it's a good way to kind of go about trying to find them. If you're not going to do that, like I said, look at the edges of flats. Look, wherever there might be some deeper grass or some shrimp to get down in or crabs to get down in, pompano will go look for those shrimp and those crabs as well. This is a river map of Stewart. This is, where I fished a lot. Actually, I picked this map because I had a charter, and I want to show you one of the things that we did just to kind of give you an example of you don't always know where they're at. So down in this area here is all flats. This is, grass flats. It can go from 1 foot deep to, 3 or 4 feet deep at high tide. And then all of this grass, all of this off of here is, maybe 4 or 5 feet at the most. So I had a charter, wanted pompano, and we were jigging that day, and I'm going to tell you about jigging here in a second. So I started right here, down here off the flats, and figured we would drift, and when we found some pompano, we'd stop and fish them. So we drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted, and we finally caught one right here. Right in the middle of this channel running into this marina is where they all decided they were going to hide out. So we caught 1 or 2. I went right back to my flats, and I drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and caught another one right there. And by now, you'd think that at 43 years old, I'd have it figured out. But we went back here, and we drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and drifted and caught 2 right there. And at that point, Captain Mike said, we're going to hang out here. So I had 3 anglers on the boat that day. We limited out on pompano in about 2 hours after I figured out that we should stay right here in this channel. And that's just the way it went. It wasn't, I would have bet you $20 there would have been fish right down here all day long, right off the edge of the flat, fishing in this little tiny kind of skinny-ish water. And they're up here in this 10, 12-foot channel with boats, big boats going in and out of it. It was just something different. So, again, don't pigeonhole yourself into one spot. You can they can be anywhere, and sometimes you'll be surprised where they're at. Jigs. So on the beach, we fished with sand fleece, and it was easy. We had sand fleece. If we were really wild and crazy, we'd throw a shrimp on there. The river, you're going to want to throw more jigs than anything else. And when it comes to jigs, there are 10,000 different kinds, colors, shapes, everything else. These are all pompano jigs. They're all successful pompano jigs. I have fished with at least 4 of these. I haven't fished with the one in the bottom right corner, but I have fished with the other 4, caught pompano in all of them. You're going to see they're very colorful, pink, red, yellow, orange, bright colors. A lot of people, if I've got 3 guys on a boat, I've got 1 fishing pink, 1 fishing green, 1 fishing yellow. If the yellow guy catches one, and nobody else does, and then he catches another one, everybody's going to yellow. Same thing with the pink. Everybody's going to pink. You kind of have to go with the color that's working that day. But what you want to do with the jigs is throw them out. You're just using your normal, 7.5 foot, medium to medium heavy rod. Have some braided line on there, 12 to 15 pounds again. Throw it out. Jig hit the bottom and just jerk the tip. Just jig it a little bit. What you want to do is have that jig bounce. You want it to bounce, and then you want it to bounce. You want it to look like kind of a shrimp coming up out of the grass, or a little crab kind of moving along the bottom or something like that. You want to kind of give it movement. You don't want to, you don't want to reel it straight in, have the thing skipping and looking, like something that never existed in nature. Throw it out, let it sit, just give it a little pop, and you want it to pop up and then back down. You don't want it to go just like this. You want it up a little bit and then back down and up and back down. Just to kind of get it, you may not be fishing grass that you're aware of, but if you are, up on top of the grass and back down in it, over rocks and back down in them, up in the air enough so that fish might be able to catch the profile and see them on the way down. You'll get more hits on the way down than any other time. So the higher up, obviously, the further down, the more chance you have for hits. Other than pompano, doing this, you're going to catch, plenty of jacks again and ladyfish, which the poor man's tarpon. They're going to come jumping out of the water, gills flaring and flipping and flopping, and especially if you've got kids on board, they're great for that. But again, I would look for jigs, look for colorful, quarter ounce, maybe go up to a half ounce if it's really windy and you're trying to cast into the wind. But enough just to get you that pop in action on the bottom. So when you catch pompano, you're going to want to cook it, probably. I'm not, but my wife wants me to cook it because she eats it, and there you go. And that's about how it goes. If you talk to people, do you like pompano? 50% are going to say yes, 50% are going to say no, whatever. One of the ways I do like pompano is at the Columbia restaurant. They have their pompano Lido Key, which is fantastic. It's good. It's tender. It's got good flavor. I'm going to leave this recipe up for you for a little while so you can look at it and, kind of get the idea of how good pompano is, and maybe you'll get hungry and go eat some later on. But it's not a white flaky fish. It's kind of, it's not as oily as bluefish or jacks or anything like that, but it's got a little bit of oil to it, just enough to kind of give it some flavor. This is a great recipe, like I said. So while we're all sitting here looking at the recipe, reading things, and enjoying our lives, anybody have any questions? If I can't get to the question now, or if you come up with a question after this webinar is over, feel free to email me. It's mredling at navionics.com, READLING at navionics.com. Again, I'm more than happy to answer any kind of questions you guys have. Oh, I see we have one from Northwest Florida. What if I'm fishing Northwest Florida? All right, so if you're fishing Northwest Florida, you're probably fishing the Gulf Shore, I'm imagining. And it's going to be the same thing as fishing the beach. You're going to want to get your big surf rod and your sand fleas or your shrimp, whatever you guys want to be using. Throw it out as far as you can. Now, the problem with the Gulf is it's shallow, crazy shallow. So in your case, if you're going to want to get out to that trough, you might have to walk out a little bit from shore, waist deep, maybe knee deep in the water, just to be able to get your line far enough out to where it's actually into where the little drop is. That Navionics map that I showed you, that was from the Navionics app on my iPad. And I also have one on my phone. And wherever you're fishing, you can look at that Navionics app and it'll show you the different 1 foot contours, and it'll show you where that drop is. So go to your Navionics app, look for that drop, and figure out how far out you're going to have to walk. Hopefully not too far. Cast your line out there, and then leave your bail open while you walk back up to your sand spike and stick it in. So that would be my suggestion for fishing up on the Gulf Coast. Again, thank everybody for attending. Hopefully you learned a little something about pompano. There's my email address. Again, if you've got any questions or problems, please feel free to give me an email at any time. Oops. So again, thank you guys very much. Have a good night. Thanks.